Hey everyone, welcome to Tales and Texts, and I'm your host Nisha, and welcome to another book review. So in today's video I am going to be reviewing Kintu by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi, narrated on Audible by Kalungi Sebandike. Now I hope I have pronounced those names correctly. If I haven't, I really don't mean any disrespect. I am terribly sorry. And I would love it if you could share the pronunciation chart with me so I could get it right the next time. Kintu is a book that I absolutely adored. I loved it. I fell in love with how authentic and raw and just wild and dangerous and dark and deep it goes. And I'd actually read this book quite a while ago, and I had just written a blog post about it rather than making a video, and I thought I had to fix that immediately, because the more number of people who read this book, I think that's just better for the entire world all around, because Jennifer is an incredible author and this author deserves to be read and cherished, and the word spread about their talent. So I will be using my blog, which is this one. In case, I'm just gonna add a tiny plug here for my blog. It's called Stories So Wild, and I will link down my blog post in the description box as well. And as always, I have pulled a couple of tarot cards to encapsulate this book, so be sure to wait around till the end of this video, or you can just jump directly down to the timestamps down below and find which cards I've pulled for Kintu. Now let's dive right in. Now, Kintu by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi is actually a generational book which spans around 300 to 350 years. It is based in Uganda, and it follows the family of a tribe leader, a tribe Pokino, who's called Kintu. Now, Kintu Chidda is the name of the tribe leader who was living in the mid 1700s, and the story starts with him. Now, the story of Kintu is just deep. It's dark, and it kind of borders, or rather balances between the worlds of the natural and the supernatural, right? And there is a quote that I actually mentioned in my blog that I always think of when I think of Kintu, which is by Maurice Druon, and it says, "Peoples bear the weight of curses longer than the princes who incur them." So peoples bear the weight of curses longer than the princes who incur them. And so that quote just sort of encapsulates the theme and the kind of the story of Kintu very beautifully, just absolutely perfectly. Because the story starts off with a curse that's put on Kintu, and it's about the repercussions that his family faces even up to 300 to 350 years later, down the line. So the book Kintu is divided into 6 parts. The first 5 parts focuses on the life and experiences of the different family members within the Kintu clan. The very first book is of Kintu himself and how he's cursed. And book 2, 3, 4, and 5, they kind of do a time jump, almost 300 to 350 years ahead into the future. And they chart the lives of 4 different people who belong to the same clan that Kintu had started, or which Kintu had birthed. And the final book is where all of these clan members finally come together. It's called Homecoming, and they all come together. They come back to the same village where Kintu was once lived, and it's about how they come together in order to shed those shackles of the curse that was on their family, that was on their on their entire lineage, starting from the time of Kintu. And one of the main things that you notice is the nature of the curse itself. So is this curse some malevolent, vengeful entity or energy that's just sort of kind of latched on and leached onto this family, and it's kind of sucking them dry energetically? Or is there something far more realistic, far more dangerous, just hiding behind the facade of the curse? And if so, what is it, and how do you break this curse? Because that's the whole point of this book. It's about how this curse is put, how it affects the generations that follow Chintu, and how they attempt to remove this curse, cleanse themselves of this curse. And in order to cleanse yourself of bad energy, bad juju, a curse, you need to understand the nature of the curse itself. And that's exactly where the meat of the story sort of focuses, because Jennifer has combined the natural with the supernatural to create this hazy, dreamlike, sort of alternative consciousness kind of environment where both the characters themselves and you, the reader, are sort of left wondering what is reality and what is just your imagination. And you have your own theories of what's happening to them right now and how this curse can be lifted, but it's just every story just kind of moves towards this really climatic end. Some of them are hopeful, some of them are tragic. But ultimately, Homecoming does leave a slightly sweet taste in your mouth, because the book does end with a slightly hopeful note. Although what this hope looks like, after coming in the wake of years of tragedy, years of living in the shadows, years of being being ostracized, being looked down upon or condescended to, and even hating yourself for being a part of this family. What hope looks like, I think, that's a very subjective thing, but it does kind of end, the book does kind of end on a hopeful note. Chintu also contains a lot of information about Uganda's history prior to colonization, then during British rule and during other colonizers' rules, and also what happened post-freedom, that is post-independence. And it talks about Uganda's history while also making a very strong political statement. So Jennifer makes a stance clear about their opinion about how Uganda evolved from this land of tiny kingdoms of tribes that kind of ruled themselves, but they also came together when the land of Uganda needed help, needed protection, and needed some sort of a support against foreign invaders, and to how it has become after colonization and where Uganda is heading into the future. So there's a lot of this political statement, all this political information is given in a very accessible way. At no point would you feel that there is just too much technical jargons or a lot of, it's very politics heavy, and you certainly do not need to be well versed in Ugandan politics in order to appreciate this information that's been provided. So that was really interesting. When Jennifer actually wrote Chintu, the British publishers actually refused to publish it because, or rather as they say, they rejected it because it was too African in nature. They said that Jennifer had made a very huge mistake, and that mistake was that the author had created a cast of characters that was 99% Ugandans, that is black people, Africans, Ugandans, very rarely, if any, white characters. The author had used authentic Ugandan names, which was difficult for people to pronounce, or rather, read between the lines, difficult for white people to pronounce. And there was no there was no narrative, no storyline, no word count dedicated to the colonizers' opinion and view of Uganda and her people. So essentially, it was not colonizer friendly. It did not show colonization in a good light. It did not even have a single white person whose story could be followed. It was only about Ugandans, about Africa and the African community. And that's why it was too African, and the publishers in Britain felt that nobody would like it. You know what? I have to disagree. I think this book is phenomenal because it's so supremely authentic. I felt like I had an intimate experience of Uganda just by reading this book. With whatever limited, exposure that I had to Uganda through this book, I felt like I was literally living there, talking to the people, sitting inside their homes and being part of this experience. I think that speaks volumes to the quality of writing that Jennifer has produced with Kintu. And of course, a couple of other things that do act as a testament to Jennifer's quality of writing and their talent is the fact that Jennifer went on to win the Kwani Manuscript Project Award, the Commonwealth Short Story Prize, and the Wyndham Campbell Prize for Kintu. So I think that should be testament enough, evidence enough to prove how good Kintu actually is. The Audible narration too was done phenomenally. They have chosen the perfect narrator, Kalungi Sabadike, who had the most authentic pronunciations, and I absolutely love that, because if there's one thing that I really do not like on Audible is that how so many books written by people of color are actually narrated by people who are outside of that culture, outside of that geography, and sometimes they're not even of the same race. And race matters a lot of times, purely because a person who is, let's say, a person who is Indian, if they read an Indian book, it is more likely that they'll get the pronunciation of the words correct compared to, let's say, a Caucasian narrator who has no lived experience, or who hasn't even heard or read these names out loud, in any of their previous Audible assignments. The chance of them getting it wrong is higher. So I do feel that geography and culture and race of the narrator also make a huge impact in the quality of the Audible narration, and Kalungi has done a phenomenal job. So I would say just go for this book, pick this book up if you want a very authentic portrayal of life in Uganda. And you also want to read a book that kind of, like I mentioned, balances has that perfect line between, that straddles the boundaries of natural and the supernatural, of the real and the imaginary, of the spiritual and the psychological. And so it's just absolutely gorgeous. It spans the Ugandan landscape and imagination, and I feel like this book deserves all of the awards and more. Hopefully in the future Jennifer will get them, because it's just absolutely incredible. And if you prefer audiobooks, I can heartily recommend that, because the audiobook narration, like I mentioned, is superb. Now we've come to the portion where I'm going to be pulling a tarot card, or rather 2 tarot cards for this book. The very first card that I'm pulling is the Six of Cups. And the reason for this is very obvious, because the Six of Cups to me represents ancestry, heritage, lineage, childhood, upbringing, so family, putting down roots and seeing how those roots grow, and what kind of tree those roots grow into, what kind of a plant or a tree, or a forest those seeds grow into. So that's what Six of Cups represents to me. And ultimately this book at its core is a story of a family. It's a story of how this family came to be as it is today, and the genesis of their trials and tribulations, the genesis of their victories, the genesis of their tragedies, and of their hopes, of their dreams for the future. So all of it goes back 350 years back to Kintu and his birth and his lifetime. And so, the choices that our ancestors make, they have repercussions through the ages, and oftentimes we don't realize this. We always, there's a tendency in the world to feel that every generation feels that we have the onus of making decisions on our own, and whatever decisions we take, or however we take those decisions, are solely the result of our direct ancestors, i.e. your grandparents and your parents, and that's just it, and perhaps even your aunts and uncles and so on, but nowhere beyond that grandparental line, right? But a family has something called generational trauma. They have generational memories, generational experiences, and even though those are seldom, if ever, except for maybe those rare families where these experiences are recorded or shared, between generations or through generations. It's very rare that these experiences and these traumas are encoded and spread consciously through the generations, so people are conscious of what happened in their family in the past and why their family is the way it is today. But a lot of the cultural values, social values, economic values, the way we approach relationships, the way we approach religion, all of these are ultimately shaped by the people who came before us, the people who birthed us in a sense, whether it's physically birthed us or birthed the lineage that we belong to. So that's why I feel like the Six of Cups is the perfect card to represent this book overall, because ultimately the choices made by Kintu affect his descendants even 300 to 350 years down the line. And that's the same with all of us. And so that's why I feel like the Six of Cups is the perfect card for this. The second card that I pulled is in relation to this, and it's Judgment. And the reason I pulled this card is because, as a continuation of the Six of Cups, is because sometimes we feel that we need to continue certain behaviors, or we need to continue carrying certain perceptions and beliefs and mindsets that have been passed down to us generationally, that have been passed down to us from our ancestors, purely because it kind of becomes like a family tradition, purely because it's something that their family does, that their lineage does, right? It's just who we are, it's encoded in our blood. Those are the kind of phrases that we use. And I feel like just like how you live with the successes of your family and you benefit from the privileges obtained by your family, you also live with the curses that your family has had to live through. It's something that we carry forward generation to generation. Again, it comes back to generational trauma, like I said. So the decisions and the experiences of certain family members in the past, no matter how far behind they are in that line of ancestry, there are a lot of times we carry that burden, that guilt, that shame, that hate, that fear, and those consequences kind of ripple out further and further down the line, because we are sort of conditioned by our family to behave in certain ways, to think in certain ways that kind of aid in the furthering of this guilt, shame, trauma, fear. So Judgment to me is about reckoning with this generational experience, and it's about confronting our role in how this generational experience is expressing itself, and whether we are forcing our children and our descendants to experience what we are experiencing, or experience some version of what we're experiencing. And it's also about forgiving our ancestors for whatever trauma they've exposed us to, of coming to terms with whatever trauma that we have done to others, because a lot of times we might not just be the victims, we might be the perpetrators. So it's about Judgment is about that time of reckoning between where ancestors, the present, and the descendants, all of us come together to decide collectively it's time to unburden ourselves of that generational guilt and the generational shame and generational fear, and to start healing from this trauma, and to try to create a more holistic and grounded lineage that we can lean back on for support. And I think that's why I feel like Judgment sort of makes sense for me. So yeah, Six of Cups and Judgment. So those are the two cards that I picked for Kintu. So this book really brings a lot of moral questions, philosophical questions in some ways, and it's just a very pertinent book to kind of look at our own families and our own dynamics within our families and our lineages. So yeah, I heartily recommend this book, and if you stuck around with me so far, thank you so much for watching, and I'll come back with you with another book in the next video. Alright, see you soon. Bye bye.